Thank you guys so much for coming out to our second edition of Collective Intelligence. Tonight we have a very special program for you guys. This is going to be a fireside chat with some amazing friends in the industry. And one thing for you guys to know is everybody who attended tonight, you guys put in amazing questions. So your questions will get asked in live time to the guests up here. And then we will talk and yap for about 30 minutes. And then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. And then all of the food and networking galore that comes after that. So first off, thank you guys so much for being here tonight. Just a round of applause for spending your time learning about AI. My name is AJ Green. I'm the founding director of growth here at the AI Collective. And this is?
And I'm Catherine McMillan, founding director of operations.
Cheers. And tonight we are going to have a great program talking about the future of web agents and AI, talking about enterprise AI adoption. But before we get to all of that fun stuff, I want to tell you guys a little bit about the collective and what we do here. So quick show of hands. Who is their first timer at an AI Collective event? Okay, well, welcome, guys. Thank you so much for coming out. It's a good turnout right there. Cheers. All right. And if you guys have been here before, then this spiel might be a little bit familiar, but for new, just pretend that you've never heard it, okay? That'll make me a lot happier. So we are the AI Collective. We started here 3 years ago in San Francisco. And at the beginning, it was really just to bring people together to talk about the future of AI. So this was after ChatGPT dropped. We basically packed an apartment together with a bunch of our engineer buddies, and we're like, hey, this thing's pretty crazy. What are we going to do about this? And what implications does this have for the rest of the industry? Well, lo and behold, that has actually blossomed into now a global organization. Both Catherine and myself flew in from around the country to be here tonight, and this is what we do. We travel around the world to bring amazing people together to have really critical conversations. So what we do at the collective is really trying to solve one problem only, which is what does it mean to be human in the AI era? There's a lot of tangents that come from that, and we'll dive into that a little bit. So what I like to say is that we're building the human layer for AI. I'm sure that many of you guys in the crowd, and as I was networking with you all, I heard many different things about building the models and the harness and application layer. Well, at the collective, we really focus on being the human side, and that is our sole mission. So we want to build a world in which technology and humanity advance in harmony, which is, small table stakes, right? Next slide, please. So what originally started as a living room meetup as a grassroots movement has now turned into over 200,000 members in over 100 chapters around the world with 30 different countries, meaning that we represent a significant portion of the globe. Fun fact, every single time that I do this presentation, these numbers are outdated because that's how quickly we're growing. Over 90% of our community has been added in the last 6 months, and we are on a hockey stick growth, and it's all thanks to people like you guys for coming out and supporting. Next slide. So that being said, we've done a really, really good job of making sure that we put stuff together. So we have done over 1,000 events around the world, many of which in San Francisco. Of course, San Francisco has hosted over 250 of these 1,000 events. Shout out San Francisco. We have a team of over 500 people that volunteer their time and their energy because they believe in the mission. And I think we owe it from the bottom of our hearts to try to do the best job that we can. And we work with over 80 partner organizations, such as many that are here today. That being said, here is social proof, a little couple stats up top. I'm sure you guys recognize some of the small companies that are here. We tend to work with some of the best people in the world, and we have a fun time doing it. So with that being said, let's get into why the hell are we here? And Catherine, I would love for you to take it away.
I think this mic is on too, so I can just stay here. Oh, no, okay, I'll go out. We'll switch. Yeah, AJ, thank you so much for introducing the community, the stats. But what's the why? What's the why of all of this? If you're in the Bay Area, you probably go to a million networking events, but you've probably noticed that things have changed rapidly, not just from 2022, but even in the past couple months, in the past couple days. It feels like things are accelerating beyond the point of our ability to comprehend or keep up with what's happening. And that's what we're seeing here. Human progress throughout time has been a relatively, linear growth, but we're seeing this elbow of opportunity and abundance that is right ahead. And models are continuing to outpace human intelligence day after day, and it's causing for people to have a great reckoning about, as AJ mentioned, what does it mean to be a human and have purpose when AI and all of these technologies can do things faster, better, and more accurate than us. So we call this the age of acceleration, and one of the most important things that we have noticed in building this community over 100 cities all around the world is that trust is the foundation of everything. Our ability to have trust in each other, in our institutions, and that there's a brighter future ahead. But because things are changing so fast, and because it's hard to adapt to a change, we're noticing a gap. Here are some stats. If you're curious, I'm not going to go into them, but basically, the state of trust in the world is not looking too good. As you can see, 60 out of 62 Gallup poll indicators are at or near all-time lows, except for small businesses and, wait, that's large, and also like DoD and military, although that might be outdated as well, given what's been happening over the past couple weeks. Next slide. So how do we build this trust? First and foremost, cultivating community, which is what we're all here doing today. Creating the conversations and dialogues to be able to learn, advance, grow. Harness the collective wisdom in this room. Everyone comes from different backgrounds, experiences. We all have something to learn and share with each other. And then finally, and most importantly, inform the people that are closest to making the decisions that impact all of us in this room and the rest of the world. So, you are here on the frontier with us, and it's a scary place, but the thing that we have is each other, and human connection in the age of AI is the most important thing. So I really appreciate all of you for coming out today and for coming with curiosity and desire to learn from the best and the brightest and the most curious in the space. And with that, I hope that tonight for each of you, you walk away with something. Whether it's a new connection, a new piece of information to share at another networking event, or even more so, inspiration to get involved more in your local community. These are some community values. We try to live out our values and make sure that our community is a space where people feel a sense of belonging, where they can let their curiosity shine, and really have this positive sum mindset. If AI is something that can create a lot of abundance for all of us, it's not a zero-sum game. And we want to make sure that everyone can reap the benefits. So I basically talked about what does that mean for you. And without further ado, I would love to invite our wonderful speakers onto the stage to join us for our fireside chat.
Is this thing on? Okay, great. Well, welcome, guys. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Maybe for those that are not familiar, maybe we do a little bit of intros around the horn.
Sounds good. Hey, everyone. I'm Jason Mays. I lead Web AI at Google, which is basically the art of taking all those machine learning models you know and love and run them client-side in the web browser. So the main benefits of that are privacy, low latency, and low cost. So, yeah.
Hey, my name's Alex Nahas. I wrote something called MCP-B, which kind of evolved into a web standard, WebMCP, which I now work on with the W3C.
I feel very underclassed here. I'm Stefan Weitz. I'm a nerd. I'm older. I have things in my fridge older than these two guys. It's great. So I was at Microsoft for years and then did private equity for a long time. Now I run the thing called HumanX, which is the world's kind of preeminent AI event in the community out there. I mean, better community. You guys have better community, but we're working with you guys to bring it together.
And that's why we're all in it together. All right, so I told these guys backstage that we are gonna come out guns a-blazing. So we're gonna give you guys the hardest question you're gonna hear tonight right out of the rip, all right? So like we talked about, the main thing that this community focuses, how do we be human, and what does it mean to be human in the AI era? And you guys are all building phenomenal things, whether that be through products, through ecosystems and communities. So how are the things that you are building and contributing to the world impacting humanity? Take it away, Jason. Yes, please.
All right.
You go first.
That's a deep question. So I guess on the client-side AI side of things, we enable the privacy aspect. So it kind of gives you the right to kind of control your data a bit more. And also, we can leverage the MPUs of these devices to reduce the power footprint as well. So I think there's some benefits there that could be tangible. Yeah.
Yeah. For WebMCP, it's the browser and the web was built for humans, and WebMCP and proposals like it are attempts to make the web more equitable for agents and AIs.
So less human then.
Yeah, less human, but through that
Service of humans.
Yeah, in service
Exactly.
of
Yeah,
humans.
you should definitely watch that Twilight Zone episode years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
How to serve man.
Yeah.
What was the question again?
How are you contributing to humanity, my friend?
Yeah.
Little task.
Well, to me, the beautiful thing with Transformers was not that it was AI. I've been doing AI-ish for a long time, back when we had collaborative filtering and Markov models and Bayesian networks, all these things that were classical kind of GoFi, good old-fashioned AI. And what struck me when LLMs came out and Transformers came out was that it wasn't AI. It really is a stochastic parrot, as we all know, but it was a different way to interact with machines as humans. And that was what was exciting to me, is that suddenly you open the aperture to people who traditionally couldn't have done something with a computer or programmed something or built something or even used something, and suddenly they can actually do that. That was the unlock to me. So that's why I love to work where we do and use these technologies to help people who are not technically savvy or who are technically amateurish still get the benefits that a lot of the nerds have had for a long time. That's where I get excited about AI and humanity.
Yeah, Stefan, I think you make a really great point. You've kind of been tracking this since 2017, but I think for a lot of the newcomers in the AI space, and even some of the smartest people in the industry, they didn't really see all of this coming. So this is actually a question from the audience that we have. Do you believe that we've underestimated AI's ability up until this point, or that technology is adopting faster than we could imagine, or both?
Well, nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. We all know that. But we didn't have the language to do what we do today with AI 10 years ago. When I was working back in 2010 on some of the stuff, you just didn't have the compute, you didn't have the data, you didn't have the model, nothing. That didn't exist. We were just doing traditional ML, which was still really cool, but wasn't the same thing. So it always seems like it's obvious in hindsight. Now looking back, you're like, oh, attention, that makes total sense. Of course that's the way it should work, But that initial paper, that innovation where attention was the thing that was so important, it opened people's minds the possibility, which I don't think, I certainly didn't have back in 2010. And so I think that was, I don't think we could have gotten here until now. Do I think it's overhyped? There are definitely places that are overhyped. There are definitely people who are going to lose a lot of money, including myself, I'm sure, and some investments. But that's the price of admission for innovation. We're going to have a lot of railroads that go to nowhere, because that's what you have to do to build a nationwide railway system. And that's the same thing with AI.
Jason, Alex, how about yourself?
I think things are moving very fast, and there might be some hype in certain areas there. So I think what it comes back down to for me is the ability to move faster than I could do before. So I think that's the real benefit that I'm seeing across the board that a lot of people can agree with for the various industries that are out there. So myself as an engineer, I used to go from 1x to 10x just as a human, and now I can do another 10x on that, and I've gone from days to hours to produce the same work. And the quality of the stuff coming out is on par with what I would have written. Or if it's not, I can just tweak the small bits that are not and get it back on track again. So yeah, I'm very excited for that side of things.
The question was, is it overhyped or underhyped? What was the question again?
It was
It was
very
a
deep.
pretty beefy question.
Yeah.
Do you think that we underestimated AI's capabilities up until this point?
I think, I don't know. For me, AI is like simultaneously the most overestimated and underestimated technology ever. Like, especially when it comes to something like a web agent, right? Like, it looks great in demos. You can browse the web, you can click through, but then it's time to like ship this production where you're actually like doing an RPA for a healthcare company, and then all of a sudden that 1% failure rate, or probably more like 10% failure rate, is like causing serious legal issues, and then that's like where the economic impact is oversold and things like that. But certainly that is becoming less true now. But I would say that, yeah.
I would actually agree with you right there. I think it is a paradoxical statement, right? That nobody can anticipate where the future is headed, but also I think it's coming here a lot faster than we anticipated, guys. Like one question I wanted to ask you guys is, being on the cutting edge of what you guys are doing, do you feel the acceleration that's been happening within the last couple of months? Like, do you feel, I'm not going to say those 3 letters that we all want to reference.
AGI?
No, please, leave it alone. But do you feel that something has really started to accelerate within the last couple of months? And tell us more about it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I spend most of my time writing code, and I think anyone who writes a lot of code right now can tell you, ever since probably, Gemini 3, Opus 4.5, I mean, it has changed. Claude Code, you can ship a huge quantity of code that's quite high quality now, and you can vibe code something that would have taken months in a number of days or weeks. Now, there are tangible downsides to that. I think there's like a crisis of understanding for code bases right now. I think anyone who writes code probably agrees with you. We're like, I've written all this code, but do I understand it? And so, yeah, I think we're yet to see, the downsides of being able to ship code this quickly. But certainly we're seeing the upsides of it right now.
So I think we're at the start of a journey. I think even though it's very exciting and it's moved very quickly, we're still at the very beginning. The more I learn about like neuroscience and other areas of AI, I think LLMs are impressive for what they do, but I think it's like one part of the bigger story. I personally believe we need to have things that can adapt their own weights and kind of evolved, like human brain has different segments of the brain to do certain tasks, and you'll need a combination of those things. And what we've created right now might not be the end game; it's the beginning of something interesting. But I don't think we're going to get to that magic 3-letter word, sorry, acronym, without other things coming along. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's enough Adderall on the planet to keep my brain going fast enough to keep up with AI right now. It's the honest truth. Like, I just don't think I can take enough to make it work. But I will say, what's interesting to me, also kind of a paradox, it is moving so quickly, as we all, of course, have seen. I think you're absolutely right. I think 4.5 really became like, holy shit, this is explicit language, sorry, but this is very real. And at the same time, I'm not sure about you folks, but I get pissy about how slow AI actually is. And so I'm sitting there, and to me, it really breaks my flow. If I'm doing something and I want to ask a question of an agent or have an agent go do something, and I'm waiting for the response in a synchronous manner, like, this sucks. This is like a 300 baud modem back when I was a kid, like painting the screen one line at a time. So I was talking to the guys on the way over here at Cerebrus who are doing a bunch of work to, it's incredible what they're doing to kind of 30, 40, 50x the kind of output tokens in these things and the reasoning models. I think that's going to be the differentiation we see in the next year is we'll move from quality, which is becoming kind of, not table stakes, but you're seeing a parity of quality to a certain extent across the big models. I think we're going to see a lot of the adoption, and what people will be drawn to is that speed and just having it as reactive as we expect a website to be today. Because today it's not. Today it's slow.
That is almost that internal frustration, right? Is how fast can the brain move versus relative to how fast can the tools adapt? I think there's little remnants of this, right? Cerebrus is one. I've been paying a lot of attention to Last was another one that came out 2 weeks ago.
Etched has some cool stuff coming out soon.
Yeah, 17,000 tokens per second on output. But you then have to have that trade-off of performance. So like you're saying, we're seeing the early signs of it, but I think there is still a lot of ways to go. And I think, like you said, it's one of the parts of the problem that we need to crack. I think for CodeGen, we've been doing a phenomenal job. But there is going to be much more that extends beyond that. Tell us a little bit more about, from the web perspective, what you guys are thinking, because that is one of the bullish bets that I think we have here at the collective, is that the ability to interface with the web, being a massive data set for agents, is going to lead to so much economic unlock. So tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, like, white-collar work happens in the browser. Like, that's where it happens at the moment. And, like, a lot of, like, the unlock of the agent space right now has been, like, automating things that weren't previously automatable, like a lot of legacy applications and things like this, or like a lot of times companies have lost the keys to the castle, and they can't even update their code to make it better. And so, yeah, I mean, your only option is browser automation. And agents unlock this, right? But the web wasn't made for agents, and in terms of like how we can make it better for them and like accelerate this and how that's going to be accelerated, I think there's a lot of different people working on this problem from a lot of different spaces. Like a friend of mine from a big lab, they're actually like training their models on these like clones of these websites to like navigate them better, which is interesting. But from another perspective, we're making these things more, essentially the websites like easier for them to parse and like showing the websites in a way for them like in a very token efficient manner so they can parse it more deterministically. Whether that will make it into training, I don't know, but it's all tool calls for WebMCP, so which they're trained to tool call. So I think that'll be, once that ships in the browsers, I think that'll be a pretty cool thing.
So just to add to that, so my vision for the future of the internet, and this is my personal vision, not Google's, is that we'll move towards an agentic internet, okay? And the work that this guy's doing in WebMCP, I think, will be a big part of that. And the reason for that is that, all these domains, every company's got a website out there. You've got functionality, you've got a search on Amazon, you've got like, Adobe's got like, image editing capabilities and all that kind of stuff. And all of those are basically tools. So if you can expose that easily, then as someone is browsing the internet, they essentially are collecting tools that are relevant to them rather than having a big, huge repository of millions of tools, and you've got the paradox of choice and all that kind of stuff. So you then have this personalized context of the tools that are relevant to you in a given moment, and then the browser becomes the entry point to all of that. And that's why I've basically put my career on client-side AI as being the orchestrator of all of that. So you can do that privately. So you can have information about you as an individual that's local and stored locally that allows it to then orchestrate and call the right things at the right time to make your life more efficient and save tens of hours per week potentially or more. So yeah.
Yeah, and on the side of orchestration, we talk about an agentic web. How does that kind of change the way that we work in the next couple of years? I mean, if we move from being the ones that are executing the tasks to orchestrating agents to be able to do them on our behalf, what disappears and what emerges from that?
I think we all have to be product managers. A lot of my friends who have kids going into college or whatnot, they say, what should they study? I'm like, cooking? I don't know, but basically go learn to be a product manager, because that's really where we're getting to. Like, that's the systems. If you think about this, what are we actually doing when we're doing prompting, we're doing vibe coding, anything else? We're basically translating the physical and the world around us into something a computer can somewhat make sense of and then codify for us in code. And so the ability to have aesthetics and taste and understanding how humans think and work and motivations and desires, that's I mean, it sounds kind of goofy. It's like a liberal arts major saying these kinds of things, but that's where because the more scientific part of the process of engineering is being rapidly co-opted by our robot masters, having that ability to actually be more human and be able to speak to systems, to create systems for humans, versus just create for agents, which is also very cool. We should totally have agent-to-agent communication. That's super hot, especially for boring stuff no one wants to do as a human. But for other things, having that humanity is going to be really, really important. So I don't know how it's going to affect the world, but that's my take on that.
Yeah, I think like people, to your point, like a lot of times when people use websites, they get stuck. But if you can just talk to your website and be like, hey, I need to figure this out, help me out, right? I think it makes a better web for the humans and the agents, right? And
yelling agent at the machine. Agent! Agent!
Yeah, exactly.
Do not make mistakes. Thank you.
I used to work at a healthcare startup, and we ran medical tests inside of the browser. We did a lot of like local AI, and it worked offline, and because it had to be done in remote places, like it was cool. It was a true medical test. It used like all the cool stuff of the browser, like it connected to a device over Bluetooth. But I would watch our users who were very non-technical, like try to operate this website, and they were a lot of times, in manufacturing facilities. They were 60 years old, and I'd be watching them in like the real user monitoring window, and I'd watch them like fail to click the right button, and then they would click the little thing down there, and they would ask for support, and we'd get one of our support people to go help them through. But if they could just ask, right? I think that's what like WebMCP or and client-side AI, or just if you had a model in there that was, because it's you need privacy, it's for healthcare, that you could just ask. I think that'd be, something that would be exciting, an exciting future.
I think you guys are touching on two sides of the same coin, right? Which is, how does the technology adapt the way in which users anticipate using this tool? And then also, how do users adapt their flow and working style around these new products? And so I love what you guys are building, and also being able to have that forefront of mind to say, okay, how are these users actually interacting with our products? And thinking about, at the end of the day, something that we talk about all the time is how can we build with humans in mind, understanding that they, at the end of the day, will still be the orchestrator. And I'm sure there will be, 50 plus sub-agents that run underneath and all these parallel agents and orchestration. But understanding at the core root, like, what do the humans play in part of that process? And it's both.
Just to add to that as well, I think there's a whole bunch of research going with like agentic UX as well. So, we all grew up, well, I think most of us grew up in an age where we Googled things and we found some results and we took actions on the results to then do something. And our children will grow up as action first. So you just say what you want to do and it gets done. And that's a very different way of thinking about things. I think we're moving towards that, and they'll get a personalized website come back in the style that they like. Maybe they're more visually thinking, or they're more analytical and they want to see the tables and charts and all the numerical details. And everyone's different, right? And I think you'll get your own lens onto all of that data in a much more customized way. And we're starting to investigate how that would evolve. Yeah.
I'm happy you brought that up, because we did have somebody in the crowd who
perfect.
had a similar question to that. And their question was specifically, when an agent executes a transaction on behalf of a user, whether that be purchasing compute or triggering a billable API, and the other side disputes is the key part, whose record do we trust? How much interpretability do we have into those records?
I've got a thought here. So given that these web standards are a work in progress, I think this is a good time to think about these things. And because the way that WebMCP works is that the website developer actually declares what to expose as a tool, they can be in control of the UX still. So if there's something that a human must click the text box for, they can make sure that that is not exposed via WebMCP, and that's still, it'll get them to like the checkout part or something, but they've got to click a button themselves to actually do the final thing, so it's legally binding with a human having done the task. And that's very different to what we've seen in the past, where you've got these other folk trying to use just the pixel space to understand the actual website and click on things for you. I think that's irresponsible, personally. I think WebMCP is a much safer, more deterministic way to do things, and you can control what is and isn't delegated. And of course, you're all the experts for your domains of what should and shouldn't be delegated.
Yeah, I just to add that, when you're giving an agent like screenshots or the ability to click around, they have access to everything. There's no way to reduce the scope, right? You can prompt it and be like, please don't submit my cart. But I mean, then you get into prompt injection and things like this, and then you're leaving things out to like chance, not like a programmatic guarantee. And WebMCP is that programmatic guarantee, right? So a web agent might only support WebMCP, and then you don't have to worry about them having this extra capability. In terms of like agent identity and like on behalf of, that's something we're discussing right now. I mean, like Jason said, it's a web standards. If you want to be part of these conversations, come join. But yeah, like in like identity, there's this concept of like on behalf of, and I think as of now, that's what we're planning to do with agents. They don't have their own identity. They have an identity that's based on behalf of a user.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of the discussion around Tesla, even now, but the who's responsible when it makes a mistake. And less so these days, much more so a few years ago, when it was like, well, if the car does something autonomously that violates a law or causes an accident or hurts somebody, God forbid, who's at stake or who's at fault? And the answer was pretty clear from Tesla, at least, which was, well, the user's at fault. But I think we saw a couple years ago insurance companies battling with this concept, and I think we'll even see it to a certain extent with the agents that we see today. Because yes, you're right, we can expose the properties of using MCP, but malicious actors, which are the ones that take advantage of these things really effectively, could, I guess, in theory, expose malicious actions, through that protocol as well. And so then you're back to kind of this whack-a-mole of who's. It's the same way that credit card people aren't credit users aren't responsible for fraudulent charges. I'm assuming we're going to see something similar with agents, where it's like, well, I didn't mean to buy 15 strawberry shortcake dolls. Don't know where that came from, on Amazon, so I'm not responsible for it. My agent did it, instead of me. And so I think we'll probably see something similar to the credit card liability things that we're seeing today, I'm assuming, as we go forward, at least for commerce.
What would you guys say is maybe some advice for people that are trying to navigate this right now? Obviously, with lots of experience, you get these battle scars of maybe that's not the best use case. But if somebody is new and looking at WebMCP or any other web protocol today, what would be some of the use cases that you think they should maybe start with, or maybe some guardrails for them to operate within?
Yeah, I'd say if you have a website, just expose a tool. I mean, it's just a little, just vibe code one, honestly. Paste in the spec and be like, hey, add some tools to my website. And then any web agent that supports it can call these tools. And it's not just, like adding tools so it can take action. It's also like a structured way to tell the agent what your website does, right? So it visits when your OpenClaw bot comes to your your website. It has more context and can actually know, and and then from there, how safe you want it to be. If you're using OpenClaw, it's going to do more than just call web MCP tools, but hopefully, we'll have agents that only support it, and like the Chrome team released an extension, the MCP extension. These are all purely support WebMCP, so if you want to do safe automation, you can do so that way.
Potentially, if you're using OpenClaw, you might have more concerns than WebMCP is what you're saying.
Yes.
There might be other concerns outside of there as well. Yeah. What are you guys thinking in terms of distribution, right? Like, I think you captured it so beautifully in the sense of the web was built for humans, right? WebMCP and other web protocols are being able to build for agents. But then what does that do to people that, like you said, those white-collar jobs? What is your solution for that? Sorry to ask the big questions, but it is something that it comes from the audience as well, maybe.
So what's the question? Like, oh, gotcha, yeah.
Thank you, Stefan.
I mean, that's a good question. I think, we're programmers, right? We're probably the ones trying to make ourselves obsolete the fastest. So I don't know if we can really, but we're not obsolete, right? If anything, there's more software than ever right now. I think it's the same thing. More work's getting done. I mean, there's work to do. It's just the job will change, If your job is filling out a form, I don't think it will be filling out forms much longer.
Yeah, I think it comes down to efficiency, as I mentioned before. People will do things faster, and roles might change. Like already as a software engineer, I'm more of an orchestrator of things. It's going in that direction, right? So, but it's still important to understand the code. So I will not commit code that's been written by any of these LLMs without looking at it and eyeballing it myself for security, scalability, all that kind of stuff. So there's still a need to learn those computer science kind of techniques, but I think the more important skills as well on top of that are how to combine things and that orchestration there, if you will. And I think those skills are, people can have to practice that a little bit and work in a different way there as things evolve potentially. But I think that's something everyone can do. I think it's too hard to learn those things, but it's just about thinking about it in a different way. So, yeah.
Right, and for decision makers, and Stefan, that's actually a question I wanted to pose to you specifically. You have talked with thousands of executives at HumanX and throughout your career. A lot of executives are facing these decisions of how they deploy these new technologies, and a lot of companies also are a little bit behind and archaic and not really adopting at the pace of maybe the folks in SF or in the startup scene. So Stefan, what are the mistakes that people are making right now as decision makers for adoption at their companies?
Well, this one's very easy. So for some reason, despite all the MBA training these executives have had and all the teams that have run PMO, project management offices for years and years and years, they see AI and they're like, screw it, just deploy it. We'll figure out ROI later. And I'm like, well, this is no different than migrating to the cloud or figuring out to replace your workday with something else. It requires a business case, and people are jumping in. I see it so often. They see a cool demo. Some 26-year-old new CTO comes in. No offense to any 26-year-olds in the room, and is like, check this out. We're going to revolutionize, HR, and it's a kick-ass demo that runs once. And they're like, yeah, we can cut half the recruiting team if we do this. Let's go, go, go. And they deploy it, and shock horror, it doesn't work. It works substandardly. And they're like, well, I guess AI kind of sucks. And that's what we're seeing now is you're seeing this kind of backlash of early adopters who did jump in without doing a basic business case that any executive should be doing. If they didn't do it, they should be fired. They're kind of saying, well, see, it's kind of overhyped. See, it doesn't work that well. It's like, well, you put the wrong effing thing, and you put the wrong tool in the wrong place. Or you optimize a thing that shouldn't have been optimized with AI. That's a dumb place to start. So that's where we're seeing a lot of the failures, frankly, is just people just not taking basic business, like 301 hygiene, as it relates to what they're using these tools, because they are just tools. They're not sentient. They're just tools. They are. And so, it's just like anything else. You don't give a 3-year-old a torch and say, go build a pony. It doesn't make any sense. That's what we're doing now with AI. Imagine that visual just for a second. 3-year-old torching a pony. I'm a little tired right now. I'm not sure what's happening. There you go.
Love it. So actually doubling down on that, this was a question from the audience. And every time, people are always so curious about predictions. And I know you guys all have magic 8 balls in the back that you turn to and ask the questions for. But you guys each have very different vantage points. So without putting anybody at jeopardy, okay, I'm curious to hear, like we talked about, there's a lot of hype that we see. Demo works great that one particular time, and ever since then, it's not the case. But what are some of the ways that you guys actually pay attention to the true signals, and what things do you guys tend to block out as noise, particularly right now?
I think like people that are building on open standards and like collaborating across companies and like are coming together to solve a problem in like an open space or open source space. These to me are the most exciting projects that like cut through the hype, because I feel like there's a lot of people trying to capture AI like with their secret solution and then get funded for it and things like this. But to me, like the browser is a great example of this, right? It's like everyone came together and built the standard of the browser, so web developers didn't have to like support 4 different browsers for their websites, right? And I think we're seeing that with AI now too, where like the really, in my opinion, the solutions that will last are built by, by a group of people agreeing that there's a problem that we need to solve together.
Just building on that, actually, like solving problems that exist and ensuring that they are diverse enough in their solution that it can work with different kind of varying factors there is important. I see some things that are very highly specific to something, and then of course it breaks in the real world, as you mentioned. So like ensuring you have the right training data to fine-tune these models so they can work in those edge cases is important. Like a good use case of this, going back to the pre-Gen AI era, is like our pose estimation models, right? You'd had human body pose estimation models, and we ensured we had diverse training data there. So I think that someone from the BBC actually tried it out, and they had basically limited arms and limited leg, various amputations and things like that. And it still worked. And a lot of others failed in that situation. So thinking about this as developers and as people making interesting things, it's our responsibility to think about all the edge cases ahead of time and try and account for that. I think a lot of people right now, especially in San Francisco, love to move fast and break things. And there's maybe reasons for that, for like VC investing and stuff to get your foot through the door, but you've then got to take it seriously and really drill down and like iron out all the creases. Yeah.
I guess I just think it's funny we're in San Francisco where the gold rush happened, in the 1850s, I guess. I don't know, I'm terrible with dates, but it's what happens when you get a gold rush? You get speculators, you get hucksters, you get zealots, and you get people who also are doing the hard work to make the extraction of gold in that case happen. And I think you're seeing the same thing with AI right now, frankly. To me, I get very nervous with the zealots. They make me nervous because they aren't generally, I find, thinking about all the edge cases and downside cases that could happen. And you can't. If you're a zealot, you kind of have to believe it's all going to work. So I get the problem. The hucksters, I think we've seen no end of them, and they're in every era of the web and every era of the economy. We see people out there who are doing it to make a buck quickly and hope they can cash out before the investors realize it was all smoke and mirrors. And what I get excited about, honestly, are just the stuff like that you folks are doing. It's just it's the the blocking and tackling of the infrastructure. And frankly, my investment firm, we invest in a lot of boring shit. It's like automation of billing for aggregate hauling, like this stuff like so boring and so silly, but it literally is a huge drag in the economy to pay someone to take concrete away. And so those are cool products, and they don't sound sexy. You're not going to go to your parents' house and say, guess what I just built? But they actually solve, some people might, but they solve real problems, and that's what I get excited about now. You have to have the dreamers, you have to have kind of the hucksters, but you got to have the guys and gals who are building the boring stuff to demonstrate to the world this can make a difference and it can have tangible value versus relying on we're going to get flying cars in the next 3 years.
exactly. I mean, this has been such a great conversation. Final question for all of you before we open it up to additional Q&A from the audience. A hypothetical situation. 2026, we drop you into the Midwest or something. You have no network, no funding, no nothing. What are you building?
I'm still using Web AI because it works offline, so I'm good there. What would I be building? This is going to be more rural area, I guess, like farming kind of land.
It's a hypothetical.
It's a great question.
Okay.
Yeah, which
starting
Midwest?
from
Which
ground
part?
zero.
Indiana or Illinois? No.
starting from ground zero to one. Maybe you just graduated from university right
okay,
now.
got
It's
you.
2026. Just picture that person and persona.
Well, so I came from Chicago today, so I feel like I can answer this question authentically. It's funny because this weekend I was talking to a buddy who's in private equity, and they have bought a bunch of pool maintenance service businesses in Florida. So basically, people that go around your pool and service your pool. I don't know. So I'm like, good for you. Holy shit, that sounds boring. But he said, here's the thing: we're rolling up all these other businesses, and they have different back ends and different scheduling systems and different billing systems and different routing systems to plow the routes in the mornings. But when they go, and this is a non-technical person, he's a great, brilliant PE guy and brilliant math guy, but not a technical person. And he's like, what do I do? And I'm just sitting here thinking over the weekend, I'm like, well, I probably could write you a system that would actually talk to all the various legacy systems that exist in these mom and pop shops, and maybe it's just Excel, maybe it's a file share somewhere, an FTP drop somewhere. We probably could write that, in a few days and give you something which wouldn't be perfect, but would get you 80, 90% of the way there in a couple days of my time. So to answer your question, I think if you're in the Midwest, let's just pick on the Midwest for a second. I'm not sure why we're doing that, but if you're there, the number of the opportunities that entrepreneurs have today to use these new tools that you folks are building and they're being consumed to transform communities and businesses and boring businesses and hard businesses, that's what I'd be focusing on. I mean, it's not a $1 billion valuation, but boy, oh boy, you can make a real business and a real life in a way you can't do otherwise.
Yeah, I'm from Cincinnati, so I feel I can also speak to this. My first job out of college when I graduated was working at a small manufacturing facility. I was maintaining their legacy web portal and doing we were a small company, wear a lot of hats. But they were still operating on legacy software that was built in the late 90s, early 2000s.
That's not that old, actually.
No, I mean, but in the era of software, that's ancient, right? And yeah, I think when I think of a company that would benefit from all the stuff that's being built in SF, I think of that company, and I know they're not even touching it with a 10-foot pole. So yeah, somebody to go in there and just bring it to them, right? Yeah.
I think I would try and focus on bringing some joy back to the community and getting people out and about together, honestly. I think that's what I probably aim for, and make something that leverages the knowledge that I have to, bring humans together more. Yeah.
Literally exactly what we're building right now.
We know some people who are working on that. That's interesting. Well, awesome. Thank you guys so much for taking your time and answering all of our questions, no matter how difficult they may be. Everybody, let's just give our guests a round of applause. Thank you so much. All right, so for the next 10 to 15 minutes, we're going to maybe ask the audience for some Q&A. We have a microphone that will be coming around. So if you guys have a question, go ahead and raise your hand. Yes, sir. We got some people up front. Go ahead and rock and roll.
Yeah, hey Jason, I met you before. I hope you remember me. But
I see the Web AI sticker on the laptop. Very cool.
From the Web AI conference a while ago. Yeah, but really exciting with the Web MCP protocol. But I don't want to be the downer, but I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on what is your response for hey, we've had accessibility functions on web pages, and 90% of web pages don't even support basic accessibility functions. And so then you're asking them to do even more work of per page expose actions for this Web MCP protocol. And so what do you see as the, what would be different this time? And also the second question is hey, there's long been an adversarial relationship between websites and Google of hey, the traffic is being routed here. Now you're asking them, even on your own website, Google's agent can route them to a competitor, for example. But even you have to expose that functionality on your website to support through WebMCP, Google's Chrome agent that can then even take your customer from your own website, right? So what do you feel about these two points?
So for your first part around accessibility, I think there's actually a nice opportunity there because a lot of this AI stuff can fill in the gaps on that regard, actually. So we've already started to see some models being used to create the alt text for images that people are too lazy to fill out, and then people who can't see those images have a chance to know what was on the web page. So I'm seeing some positive effects there, actually. But in terms of like, well, if they weren't bothering to fill out the alt text in the first place, then why are they going to expose WebMCP? I think it comes down to the same reason as why everyone built a mobile website when we only had desktop websites in the past. It becomes a necessity at some point when if you've not got an agentic website, you're kind of not cool. And I think a lot of people will be like, oh, I need to have that ability to kind of be discoverable and be used by the agents of tomorrow and that kind of thing. So I feel that's probably why people will bother to take more notice of it as it evolves. If it continues growing at the rate it is, and maybe you've got some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would say you'd be surprised. I think accessibility is actually the #1 conversation that people that are interested in the spec are talking about. A lot of people from the W3C, which is like, this is like the consortium that like decides what goes in the browser and things. There's a huge community of people that work there with people that are disabled and need help browsing the web, and they're very excited about this API for this reason, because you can have an agent act on behalf of, like, say, a blind user, right? And they can just talk, and they can turn their intent into an outcome that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to do before. So, yeah, I think to your point, like, a lot of websites are not accessible right now. It's a huge problem. But I think with the rate we can write code now, like, not writing code is no longer an excuse, at least, especially one where the agent can test as it writes. So
that's a good point, actually. If your function already exists, you just need to write that a little bit to expose it.
Yeah.
So that's something that could be semi-automated almost at this point. I think you could say which ones to expose. It goes and adds those declarations, and you're basically done, right? So obviously you should still check the code that comes back there. And the second part of your question was, sorry, did I answer that one? Or? Oh, sorry.
The second part was like the adversarial relationship between publishers.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe I could the adversarial relationship between publishers, website owners, and Google at the Chrome browser level.
Yeah.
Because Google, by exposing the WebMCP, the publisher is exposing their website to be routed away, their user to be routed away.
So first of all, WebMCP isn't like just by Google. It's a web standard, just like all the other web standards out there. So it doesn't mean it's just Google that would benefit from such a thing. Any agent out there that can view a web page, which is pretty much all of them these days, I think, could benefit from the WebMCP hooks to those sites, essentially. So in that sense, I think it's a fair game there for people to develop things to build off of that. Yeah.
Interesting question. Sorry, you just gave me a little bit of inspiration. What would be, like the YC request for startups, for the two up here, what would be your request for people that are using WebMCP? What types of things do you want to see people using with the protocol you're making?
I'd say the two biggest issues I see with WebMCP are, like we talked about, like automating adoption. So like your team pushes a feature to your website, automatically have a PR that also adds WebMCP to that new feature you pushed. And then accessibility, right? I think that'd be a huge one. There's a huge opportunity, especially for helping people browse the web. And then the third one would be like making it, just privacy and AI and doing things in local in the browser. I think there's, now that you have tools exposed on your web page and you can ship an agent inside of your web page that's totally local, you get a free agentic experience. I think there's going to be a future there, in my opinion.
We have another question over here.
Yes, you guys all may have heard of the buzz of OpenClaw. In fact, I'm using OpenClaw. It's connected to Cloud Code, and I'm programming no different than this gentleman with the laptop. I'd love to get your guys' opinion on Cloud Code and where you see it's going. I'm sorry, OpenClaw.
Boy. We haven't seen the impacts of it yet. I mean, we've seen some. I forget who it was, and someone in DoD or somewhere installed it in something, and it leaked a bunch of information, which was entirely predictable, of course. I have this suspicion, I could be totally wrong, that it's a moment in time. It'll plant a flag that around what's possible, but it becoming the de facto for personal agents would surprise me at this point. But I think it is a kind of a marker or a touchstone people can look at and go, oh, that's interesting. Like that, I can now begin to understand and internalize what it might mean. But I would be surprised, especially now that Meta is going to do whatever they do with it. I'd be surprised if it were to become, the standard. That's my opinion, at least.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Like, I think it's ignited some sparks and thoughts, and I need to rein things in as well. Have some checks there, and I think that's healthy. That's good, and I think other things will evolve from that in the future. That I think that's the same reason, like, even the original MCP, like, it exists, but now you've got like Web MCP and other alternatives coming out. So, it's the beginning of a journey. It's not the end. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Yeah.
What else to add, right?
It kind of reminds me of like when cars first came out. There were no seat belts, and then there were the crappy belts that kind of went over your shoulder. Then there were airbags. And I think Cloudbot is kind of like the first generation of car that was like, just go. You can get in the car and drive to Baskin Robbins, but if you take a turn too quickly, wheels fall off and you float through the windshield. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing now. Then over time, the technology gets safer and safer, and I think it's what we're going to see with this.
I think it gives us a lot of signals, right? What do people want? People want persistent memory. They want levels of agent orchestration. They're likely willing to overlook a lot of security and compliance in order to get maximum performance from their personal agents. I think it's a huge win for personal agents, but I totally agree. It'll be the first of many, many, many to come, I guarantee. Great question.
Yeah, here. Great conversation about we talked about a lot of web, right? The web AI and also the MCP. So in terms of the web, this should be the human native internet. Basically, it's built for the humans. Now we need a web browser when we browse the internet. And now we're working on both from Google and working on to improve this human native web to bring the capability of the agent native or agent compatible web, make it agent compatible. And I want to see, do you guys have some vision about what is going to be the AI native web? It's going to the future. Is there going to be an AI native internet? So it's going to be totally different from the browser and website. These are the humans, right? What is going to be the AI native thing, internet especially?
It's fascinating.
I thought about that. I think these things won't change overnight. I think we're going to live in that hybrid space for quite some time. But the benefit of having things exposed as tools and such allows you to be maybe more efficient. So there's going to be this nice trade-off between I need efficiency today versus I want to go look at a human-created site and like go through the UX of that, or for other reasons maybe. So I think they'll coexist for quite some time. Agents themselves might prefer just to stick to all the WebMCP stuff. They might prefer just to interface with that versus trying to utilize pixel space to understand what the hell's going on the website, because they can be more efficient with their tokens. It will cost less. There's like many benefits to having those things exposed. So my thoughts are that they'll coexist. I don't know if it will ever shift to a fully agentic internet, and I'd be sad if that happened, honestly. I like the human side of the internet. I think that should still exist. But there might be times when you don't need to get something done, all of that UX there. I can just ask the agent to do something on Amazon and get my black socks by tomorrow. I don't need to worry too much about it. But there's other times where I do want to kind of experience something. Maybe I'm buying a new car or something, and I want to go check out the 3D visuals and see it in augmented reality and like have that human experience before I make a big purchase like that. So I think it comes down to like, is it offering a service or is it offering things like some branding kind of experience where you might shift between those two modalities? Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, the original, when agents came out, or like, all this like AI hype started, people were like, oh, the browser's dead, right? We don't need the browser anymore. We're just going to use APIs for everything. But then you look at the world and it's messy. Maybe like 1% of companies have like well-documented public APIs. And then if you do if they do support, an API, they probably do not support OAuth, which you really need if you want to make it seamless, right? So the browser is needed just because that's where things are happening right now. And if you want to actually write an automation, you're going to have to involve the browser in some way right now. Because if you have a workflow that maybe goes across 5 services and 4 of those services have an API, but the 5th one doesn't, you need the browser, right? And but yeah, totally. Like in far future when agents are doing everything, maybe it'll be all just APIs and no browser needed. But certainly for now, the humans are needed, and so are the websites. So yeah.
But I think, and I'll just be quick, I think you asked an interesting question, kind of a first principle question. I don't think any person in this room, maybe except for just a few very, very sad nerds, would say that the browser is the best interface that humanity could develop in order to book a ticket to a movie. I'm making it up, whatever it might be. That's a shitty example, but you get the idea. So I think you're asking the right question, which is if you could kind of strip away. I mean, MCP is awesome, but it's not it's kind of not a band-aid, but a bolt-on to an existing infrastructure. And we're kind of making this flat, two-dimensional, static, not that friendly to human surface more capable. It's great, it's cool. And if you approach it from the direction you're coming from, which is, again, first principles, how would you design an experience that didn't require the use of a two-dimensional flat object and a mouse and a cursor and clicking through shitty breadcrumbs and everything else, and losing state and cookies and all that crap? What would you do? And we can mock the Vision Pro all we want to. I mean, I still have mine. I've used it twice. It's great. But that was a fundamentally different paradigm of how you could think about computing. And even the early Alexa, when that first came out, I had the very first one, and I was like, this is going to revolutionize the world. Because you could have that natural language conversation. Now, granted, I just asked it to set timers all the time, but at the time, you could see that different interaction model. I think that's what we need with AI is we need all the work you're doing too, don't get me wrong, and we need to kind of rethink human-computer interaction generally and get it away from just fixing our current shit and pushing towards something fundamentally different. But what that is, I'm not smart enough to know.
Stefan, that was literally my exact take,
I'm
bar for
sorry.
bar. I was going to say the same thing. But building on top of that, I think redesigning the interface. I'm not as technical as these guys up here, but something that I think about a lot is human-computer interaction, or the computing experience. I actually had a very debilitating injury last year, which made me hands-off keyboard for 2 entire weeks, bilateral tendinitis. Would not wish upon my worst enemy to experience that. But that made me realize, you talked about accessibility before, how behind we are on making that interface a lot more powerful, a lot less latency. And I would love to see more work in the wearable space to be able to get time away from the screens and back into what we want to do, which is live our lives. So that's just my take.
I'll give a hot take. I don't really use the browser anymore, guys. I don't. I'm in my terminal all day. Ask her. I'm in my terminal all day, multiple instances. It is a rare occasion in which I go to the browser and I'm like, oh, how exquisite of an experience this is. And I would actually be willing to bet that over time, like we're saying, slop is coming out more and more by the day. I think that if you want to build really beautiful experiences and amazing UX for the users, for humans, I think that will be appreciated over time. But I wonder too, a world in which you go to a website and it detects, are you a human or are you an AI? And then develops from there on out. We have more questions over here? Yes. 2 more in the back, yes.
Okay, I'll keep it brief here. Thank you very, very much. This has been a great presentation. This might be outside your wheelhouse, and it's maybe something a little more mundane, but if you look out that window in the back, there is a power plant, and it is burning natural gas. So Jensen Huang released the Vera chip. I don't know if anybody knows power consumption of that chip. It's water-cooled. It's a water-cooled chip. So if you do a Google search and you do a ChatGPT query, does anybody want to guess how much more energy? I've got a couple of academic papers that can show you this. It's 100x. So my question is, do you have any thoughts about how we're going to get energy?
I have some ideas. if you don't mind. I'm very fascinated by this. I think this is a huge thing for us to talk about. So two things real quickly. I think first, we are going to see Javon's paradox play out in real time, where essentially it's, as we make things cheaper, more accessible, more powerful, we actually increase the adoption, which therefore makes it more accessible across the board. I think we've seen that play out over the last couple of years. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think the other thing that I find really interesting as of late is using a lot of compression techniques for tokens. For example, could we use, rather than doing pixelation and screenshots and everything else that goes into typical browser use, being able to use API and MCP, particularly WebMCP, makes it so much more token efficient that you actually get to the same outcome without having to burn that excessive rate. So I think it's both. I think it's as the model capabilities increase and also as our compression techniques increase, we'll actually be, over time, using less tokens than we are today, I would hope.
And just to add to that on the efficiency side, actually, I'm a big advocate for smaller models doing essentially the same stuff. I think, there'll be a pivotal inflection point where maybe a 7 billion parameter model of tomorrow is as good as a 70 billion parameter model of today. And at some point, that's good enough for 80, 90% of the tasks that most people are trying to get done. And then you can use the tiny NPU chip that's built into your processor that's very power efficient compared to the GPUs out there. And that'll help reduce some of that stuff too, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's exactly right. I mean, when we invest in areas, we look at areas of chip design where you have chips that can be tuned to a particular model type, for example. So they're highly efficient. I mean, at the end of the day, GPUs are amazing, and Jensen's done an incredible job. And it's like a big stick. You don't need a lot of this, for a lot of the stuff that we're doing. So yeah, I think small models are great. Custom silicon is great. And then we're just going to have, I was in the Middle East a couple months ago, and the U.S. is using that area as kind of a forward deployed infrastructure for AI, because you do have a ton of space. You've got a ton of solar energy. You can cool it fairly efficiently using different methods down there, even though it's hot as hell. So you're going to see sovereign banks of compute in regions you probably wouldn't expect because of their proximity to limitless, inexpensive power and land in a way that the U.S. will not have or permit or use. So all those things will be true. We'll have a lot more power generation, we'll have a lot more efficient compute, and we'll have a lot more efficient chips to power these things.
We may also have orbital compute as well, potentially. Extraterrestrial compute. No, sorry, not extraterrestrial.
Oh, yeah.
But orbital, yes, being able to
space
send
cool
space.
compute. Yeah, exactly. That's not going to end badly at all.
Yeah. All right, guys, we have time for one more final question. Let's go hat in the back right there. Oh, sorry, hat in the middle, I guess. Yes, sorry. Red cat, blue cat, whatever the hell.
I guess I'm going to ask a question that kind of touches on those last two questions that were asked around, power usage. You're talking about reducing tokens. You're talking about making things a little bit faster, more efficient. When I started vibe coding, when that sort of became a thing, say build a website, help me rebuild my website. And it did that for me. It took this whole language that I had and turned it into another language and optimized it. But you know what? It didn't. It actually created a lot more junk code because I didn't say componentize these things, make reusable components and things like that. And so what kind of has been bothering me about that, and the reason for why I've been kind of working with people that are automating their code, what I'm seeing is that they just do that. They say, build this thing for me, and they're like, hey, look, I've got this thing that I just built, and they put it up on their website. But actually, it's inefficient. And so my question for you is, AI kind of does know how to be efficient, and we're starting to see people creating patterns that reduce tokens like JSON now to tune, right? Is there going to be a programming language that is driven and managed by AI to do all of that optimization and to just use best practices and ignore necessarily that's the fact that someone said, build me this web page, actually just do it based on standards that AI products can know and understand? Because at the end of the day, it's the interface that we care about, whether we're talking to it or we're using a browser, whatever the case, terminal. the web page needs to be optimized, the app needs to be optimized, and I'm just wondering if there's a new opportunity for a new programming language that is AI-based.
Well, I'll just say the thing I'd like to see. I was talking to Amjad yesterday at Replit. If you've used Replit, everyone use Replit. It's a great vibe coding platform. It's great. So he has a new agent coming out soon. But if you look how they progressed over the last couple of releases, initially you could get into real trouble with Agent 1. You could do a lot of bad stuff, and I did a lot of bad stuff, and you had your compute costs go through the roof because you're like, oh, I didn't think about that. And then Agent 2 came out with a security review built in. Now Agent 3's out, and they've got an architecture review. So as it finishes your first pass of the vibe-coded slop you just created, like that I created, then it'll do an architectural review, which is using patterns you just talked about, and it goes through and says, oh, hey, I found this thing, I found that thing, this is componentized, you have no index here. So it does that. So Agent 4 is going to have even more of that kind of stuff. So I think we're getting there. I think you're beginning to see. And that's, if you talk to the guys at Anthropic, Opus 4.5, I think was, no, I don't remember, but one of the versions recently was mostly written by itself. And so you're beginning to see this rapid iteration of both the quantity of things that can be written, but then also, to your point, embedding patterns and practices into the systems themselves. They can create non-front page code for those who are old enough to remember front page. It was an old HTML WYSIWYG thing back in the day that you would try something and it would be beautiful on the screen, and you go to the code and change one line, the whole app would break. It was incredible. It's the worst thing in the world. But yeah, we're getting a lot of that now. I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, I think about like a lot, beyond like a programming language for AI. What would be the best programming language in general for AI to use? We're seeing strict types be really good, or TypeScript inference be really important. But there's a lot of talk about like verifiably correct software and things like this. I don't know. I think it's cool. I do think there is room. The fact that AI can write so much code now very quickly, there is room for a language that's super accurate and very verbose. Maybe it's Java, so, but yeah.
Maybe not. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure on this one. I need to think about this more, about like if a new language would solve the problem or not, honestly. And I've got a rant on LinkedIn about Tune, so you should probably read that. I felt that people weren't using JSON in the correct way to be representative of how they're just using Tune, essentially. I think I actually proved that I could get less tokens of JSON just formatted correctly in the first place. So I'm cautious about inventing new things unless there's a very thorough use case for it. I'm not against it, but I'd like to see more evidence that it would solve the things versus having another language to then deal with or something like that. So, yeah.
Same boat. I think just based off first principles, I believe we could probably solve that problem through better application layers, right? Like, for example, what Replit is doing is phenomenal. And I think, yes, like there may be a use case for a more superior programming language, but maybe we could get to the point of where we don't have such amount of technical debt by just having the right applications hit at the right sequence. But yeah, anybody out there, this would be fun to talk about more. But that is all that we have for tonight, you guys. So thank you so much for coming out to Collective Intelligence. Incredibly appreciate it. We do these the first week of every month, so we'll be back here in April. And if you guys are curious about learning more, feel free to check out aicollective.com, connect these amazing individuals up here. There is plenty of food left in the back, and we now have networking for the last little bit. And yes.
And for the people who ask questions, and also the lady in the white at the back who didn't get to ask a question but was next in line, please come to the front. I've got some WebAI smartwatches for you, so come grab those. Thank you.
They're awesome.